Should be us now. Perfect. So thank you. Without further ado, welcome to our CILT live webinar, which is going to discuss careers in the rail industry in the UK, some barriers to entry that some people have experienced in their careers, and also a little bit from the panel around career history, what we each do in our roles day to day, and why the rail industry is quite fabulous in terms of once you're in, there's so many different things to get up to. We're full of variety, we're full of great people, and we do deliver a really important product for our country. So that'll be today's high level theme as a bit of an informal panel discussion, and hopefully those who will watch this in future will find it useful and insightful based on what we can discuss today. So I'll kick off by introducing myself. So my name's Laura Smith. I'm a programme manager within Network Rail, and I'm based in our major programmes team up in York. I'll come to Lee next for introductions.
Hello, I'm Lee Paine, a project management consultant for CPC Project Services.
Lovely, thanks Lee. And Nina?
I'm Nina Lockwood. I'm the Chief Executive of Intuitive Talent Solutions. So we are an executive search company who focus solely on the UK transport industry, and I've been working with the rail industry for coming up to 11 years now, and I've loved every single minute of it.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much both for joining us. So this has been an eagerly anticipated event in the CILT calendar, so I'm sure that today's conversations will live up to that. So yeah, we'll kick off with a bit of general overview of each of our experiences and why we chose rail, how have we ended up here, and how are we still so enthusiastic given all the challenges that we've been facing. Lee, I will come to you first and foremost, if that's all right. If you could give us a little overview, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, so it's a good few years now. I've been in the rail industry 5 years. So I'll take it back to the start. So I joined the army at 18, done 6 years, 8 months in the army. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, new career time. I'm still quite young to try something else while I'm still young. And yeah, I got to the rail industry. A friend of mine actually inspired me for the railway. He kept talking about his job when I was in the army for like 2 or 3 years, consistently saying, "Oh, I love the railway. I'm doing signalling." And I thought, okay, if you're still talking like that in a year's time, I'll be interested to still, take a listen for my next career. And then anyway, a year later, we had the same conversation. He was even more inspiring about his job than he was before. I thought, how can this guy be so enthusiastic about his job? Like, this isn't right. And then I thought, right, 1 more year. If you're still talking like that, that's it. I'm gonna commit and try and get on the railway. And a year later, he was still as inspired as he was. And his dad actually had made a really good career as well at Network Rail. So yeah, I kind of really like the approach of you could go anywhere in, from starting right at the bottom to the top. So that was my reason for getting into the industry, was kind of, I like the opportunity that you could just take it anywhere from, providing you show the right attitude and in the right place, right time, and the opportunity presents itself. There is no barrier or limitations where you can go. So yeah, that was my reason. And so yeah, I got into the railway 5 years ago, 2018. I took an opportunity at Govia Thameslink Railway. And I was there for about 2.5 years. So I started at Cellar. So I was traveling 2.5 hours because I wanted, it was quite difficult to get into the industry with no engineering experience. So I was traveling 2.5 hours one way, 2.5 hours back, so 5 hours a day traveling for the first year and a half. And then I took a promotion to Brighton Depot, which was shaved an hour each way off the time for me. So then I was doing a year there. So and then the job roles were rolling stock maintenance engineer. So I was doing assistant service engineer at Sellers for the first year and a half, doing overhauls and stuff on the Southern 377 units. And then I moved to Brighton, where it was a bit more maintenance, time-based exams or mileage. So I've done that for a year, and then I thought, do you know what? I think I can do a project manager job. So I looked at the job spec, and I looked for about a year this job spec, and I just got more confident with it because when I first got out, I wanted to be the overall goal for me was to be a project manager, and I set a 5-year benchmark to get to that point when I got out of the army, and I've done it in 2.5 years. So I was obviously chuffed that I was managed to half that. So yeah, I got into Network Rail as a scheme project manager. And I was doing signaling, testing, commissioning projects there. And then I more recently, about 6 months back, joined CPC Project Services as a project manager consultant. And my current commission is with Network Rail again in supply chain operations in the buildings and facilities area. So yeah, that's kind of my career to date, if you like.
Fabulous. It's been quite a journey. I guess that's probably what we all reflect on. And I imagine, you'll see this loads with all the people you speak to across industries, that I think when you start, there's probably no defined hierarchy or plan in terms of what your exact role profiles or how your trip throughout the rail industry will look in terms of all the different jobs that present themselves. And we've managed to mirror our timelines, Lee, because I likewise ended up in the rail industry 5 years ago. By sheer accident. There was no real plan in terms of where I wanted to be after university, and it was literally just seeing a Network Rail stand at a graduate scheme up in Glasgow, read a bit about each of the schemes, submitted an application, went through some rigorous testing for about 6 months, so I was well and truly grilled online and then in person, and was offered a role on what was the general management graduate scheme based in York. So we are quite good at that as an industry. You never seem to get your first job just 15 minutes down the road. So yeah, relocated life 200 miles south, but 5 years later I'm still here. So hey, somebody had a divine plan. But I started in the maintenance team, which I think was really valuable because we've got quite a lot of people in project roles who perhaps don't understand some of the challenges that our frontline workforce experience. So I spent a year doing frontline maintenance and also working across different divisions in Network Rail, from sort of HR, finance, sponsorship, and did a bit of time in signalling and operations, and also spent a couple of months in L&ER, which was really exciting to understand from the other side, where Network Rail can be a little bit trickier to engage with from a stakeholder point of view. So having that sort of embedded understanding was really helpful. So that was about a year and a half, and then I moved into operations based in York. So I worked in our signalling team, so working with signalling staff, mobile operations managers, and learning how we could improve our response to incidents and faults on the railway, to improve passenger and workforce safety, and also train performance. So a fairly large remit, and I'd like to think in some areas we made some really good improvements, but with the railway being so governed by standards and safety frameworks, it can be a little bit tricky to navigate the bureaucracy, as I think we're all aware. But our team was very much around simpler, better ways of doing day-to-day tasks, from getting train out of depot on time, and remedial sort of fault response, getting any sort of fixes down to minimum time, whilst obviously minimising track worker and train interface at all times. So I spent 2.5 years in the wonderful world of operations before moving to major projects last year, which has been very interesting, a different learning curve, more strategic mindset, which I struggle with because I'm still always desperate to get out and get involved in all the stuff that's going on day to day. But I've managed to take a bit of a step back, and our team leads on all the major change programmes that get rolled out on Network Rail's Eastern region, and we interface with each of the routes, again ensuring that all the frontline teams are really well briefed, informed, consulted, to make sure the changes work as well as they possibly can. So we're a small team, but we get given quite big meaty things, so it's always interesting. But yeah, likewise, still enjoying my time here and always full of enthusiasm. Nina, I'll probably come to you now if that's all right, because Lee and I have obviously shared our fabulous respective 5 years. So from your perspective, what is so good about the rail industry?
I think the two of you have given us some clues in what you've just said, actually. And I know Lee's story because I came across Lee 5+ years ago. when he was appearing with some increasing regularity on my LinkedIn timeline. So this dude kept popping up, kind of like, oh, I've met this person and I've had this conversation and I've done this today. And I was like, oh, who is this fella? He's just like constantly here. And he's got all this energy and all this enthusiasm. And like, so I dropped him a note. We weren't connected, but because of how LinkedIn works, Lee was connected with people that I was, or they were commenting. And he was getting some really senior people commenting on his LinkedIn post. I was like, who is this guy? I need to speak to him. I need to meet him. So we met at Euston Station for a coffee on one of my trips down to London from the Northwest. And I was immediately blown away by Lee's attitude. So that's a word that he's used already, and it's something that is coming out in spades from both of you, is that you've got this energy and this enthusiasm for what you do, but also a massive commitment to not only the organisation that you're working for, but a willingness to the commitment to your own career. Because quite honestly, a 2.5 hour commute either way, in Lee's case, to your first job, or for Laura, moving up in sticks from Glasgow to go to York, that's moving countries, for goodness sake, So having that commitment to your career and to getting a flying start in it is both of you are absolutely brilliant examples of that. I think as well, what really strikes me from knowing Lee as well as I have done over the last few years is his focus on not necessarily a specific role in a specific place, but a vision of where I want my career to go to, and an acknowledgement that I can't come in and go immediately into that. I'm going to have to go via a route, but I'm going to keep that in my mind in relation to what I want to do. And I think by having that level of focus and having those goals written down to say this is what I want to be doing and by when, that gives you, it's like your North Star. It's kind of every opportunity that comes along, is it taking me closer to that or further away? And sometimes the further away ones are actually the right ones to go to, because you can always change where your North Star is if it feels right at the time. So I think in terms of a career in rail, I think you're both an amazing example of that. There's some other stuff around. Laura, you said you kind of came into it by accident. So Lee was very determined. Yeah, I want to go and work for the rail industry for these reasons. You've kind of saw a stand at a graduate fair, and like, oh, we'll give this a go. I speak to so many people who will say, well, I remember somebody I interviewed on the podcast who said, yeah, I came in on an 8-week contract and I'm still here 27 years later. I think it's an industry that once you're in it, it's so infectious and it's such an amazing place to work that you don't actually want to work anywhere else. So I think in terms of a career in the rail industry, if you are willing to commit to your career and putting yourself out a bit, because it's not always going to be on your doorstep, it's not always going to be the ideal job from every perspective, but I can guarantee you'll learn loads whilst you're doing it. And have that right attitude about learning. Laura, you mentioned a steep learning curve. Amazing. Get out of your comfort zone, try new things, be open to opportunities, even if those opportunities were not necessarily part of the journey you thought you'd go on.
I think that's fabulous advice, and we've probably not reflected on it ourselves, Lee. I wouldn't imagine over the time about the genuine moves and the commitments and the amount of sacrifices you end up making in your personal life, from shift work to long commutes. It does take a bit of a dent in that, and I don't think people external to the industry perhaps see quite some of those sacrifices until you're actually living it and doing it. But I think we're reasonably strong testament to the fact that it doesn't put you off, and I think it gives you the best exposure to some of the people in our industry who are doing some of the best work but don't necessarily get the direct recognition, or we can't always correlate how the work that's done on pouring wet, cold Saturday night is helping people have a smoother, more reliable journey to work. So I think that sort of advocacy and understanding is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's people often see the guitar player and don't see what goes behind the scenes to playing the guitar. You know, all the effort that you're putting in, you just see, oh, you know, this person's got this opportunity, they've got that opportunity. It's like, you know, you're driving that opportunity by just being in the right place, whether it's a LinkedIn post, you being enthusiastic, supporting the industry, supporting your colleagues. I'll tell you, one of the things that really helped me actually was the COO of GTR at the time, Steve White, and he'd seen some of my posts supporting ex-forces and trying to make CVs with people to, you know, I think I've done like 7 CVs over a weekend to support some ex-forces guys coming out. And yeah, I think he'd seen it, and then he forwarded me onto the head of people. I think it was, yeah, head of people development, I think it was, Zoe Hudson, and she then become my mentor for a little while. And those mentors, I think, are good to have in your business and outside the business. So you've got kind of 2 different roads to look at. You've got the internal road, and to actually look inside yourself and say, you know, what I wanted before I joined, does it still marry up with what I want now? And, you know, does my career path allow for what I want? And one of the things that she had taught me to look at was stop looking at job roles and start looking at what you want as a person, what energizes you as a person, and see if job roles match what you want out of a career. And that's when I stopped looking at job roles. I was like, okay, no more job roles. I'm just going to look at, okay, what wakes Lee Paine up in the morning, what energizes me. And I quickly realized, well, actually, I love the engineering and it was great, and I really enjoyed learning about it. But I really like to, you know, be involved in meetings and things like that, and, you know, be suited and booted, go to London. And that was kind of how I visioned my career, which I didn't see. You know, I think people aren't often truthful enough about that and say, oh, I like to feel quite important, you want to be part of something bigger. But some people are really happy to be on the tools, and I met some fantastic engineers that I just rubbed shoulders with and learned so much from, which gave me an appreciation for what happens on the ground, you know, day to day, what goes into putting a train on the tracks and getting passengers from A to B. So, you know, whatever you're doing on the railway, you are making a massive contribution, and I like that. There's so many different sort of mechanical parts to it, and, you know, some of the unsung heroes on night shifts to make sure that, you know, the trains are prepped ready for the morning, or whether the signalling is good and equipped and checked properly to make sure that's safe for passengers. Yeah, there's so much to it, and I think that's one thing I struggled with in the railway was, where's my career going, you know? And it's constantly up and down, left and right, like, oh, you know, I could have this linear career path in the army, which was great. It was like, I know every rank that I was going to be, whereas, you know, you could do a job for 10 years and then skip 5 or 6 levels because you've got, you know, some great experience. So that's what I love about it. It's just that you can literally go anywhere providing you want it. And, you know, networking, I'd say, is key, because it's quite a small industry, really. You start to learn people, and I think that's possibly why people stay in it, is because it's quite, even with the supply chain, it's quite quickly linked. When you start putting yourself out there, you start joining the dots, and, oh, do you know so and so? Do you know so and so? And yeah, there's always someone that someone knows somewhere. And then when you find that common ground, you've then got, you just add to that, which is, yeah, I just love that. I love that about it. And it's also got a fantastic veteran network as well. A lot of the companies and supply chain in rail or consultancies also support that, which aligns with my vision. So, and being part of those businesses. So, yeah, it's a great industry. Yeah, fantastic industry.
Yeah. Can I jump in there, Laura?
Of course,
with this
you can.
Kind of, one of the things I've just recorded a new podcast episode this afternoon with David Simpson, who's the service delivery director at ScotRail. And David has been in the industry for his entire career, joined as a graduate with British Rail. And it's like he has literally touched every element of the industry on his career journey through. And it was so fascinating to listen to him. What struck me again, and this happens so many times in conversations, is that a career in rail is not all about the trains. So if I say to my daughter's peer group, for example, and she's 20, so they're kind of, you know, early 20s, and I say, what about a career in the rail industry? And so often I'll get a reply, I don't want to be a train driver. Well, okay. You don't need to be, because whatever job you are looking for, you can do in the rail industry. If you want to work in HR and be on the people side of things, if you want to work in a legal sense, if you want to be in marketing, if you want to be in retail, commercial, there's literally every opportunity possible within this industry. And I think for me, it's kind of my most common refrain is, it's not all about the trains. And obviously the trains are important because that's how we move people and goods from A to B. But they're the means that which we do it, not why we do it. And the why is massive for me in terms of that sense of purpose that you get when you work on the UK railway, in terms of how the railway supports the economy, supports people getting to see relatives and friends. It gets us to work and home again. It gets goods from the port to where they need to be so that we can take delivery of them at home. All of this amazing stuff. And I think as an industry, we need to get better at talking about what we actually do. It's not all about the trains.
I think you're absolutely right. We're so rife with multiple opportunities, and you speak to people in your friend groups, and I've tried to get a bit more involved in networks, I think, since joining. Like, I know, Lee, you've touched on the veterans, but we've obviously done a lot more with women in rail, which was around when I started, but we probably, again, from a Network Rail perspective here, we didn't publicise it hugely. And it's been great to actually get involved and see not just other women in rail, but people advocating for, you know, posts, be it part-time working, flexible opportunities. And we've made a real effort now actually to look at some of our more frontline roles. For example, signalling roles at York Rock, we've now looked at a pilot scheme to introduce part-time split shift working, because previously some of these roles were completely inaccessible for people who had, you know, caring responsibilities or couldn't commit to doing shift work on a permanent full-time basis. So it's really amazing in just that 5-year window to actually see some of the real progress that we've made. And again, we probably don't shout loud enough about it because we've got a lot of great people in jobs they've been in for so many years. And I've said this to a lot of staff in the past, although we can all get a bit grumpy and we've had a lot of change and a lot of turbulence in the last year or so with industrial relations, but we wouldn't all still be here if it was such a bad place. So I think we're all testament to the fact that your retention in itself is the evidence clearly that we're all doing something right. And it's blooming infectious. I don't know about you two, but as soon as you start here, it's in your blood. I can't probably see myself, you know, elsewhere. I can see myself in other bits of the industry, but you know, the thought of fully leaving and detaching from rail, I think you would almost lose part of your sort of corporate and personal identity now. Which, I didn't think I'd be saying 5 years ago, but there we go.
I think there's definitely an opportunity to be had, isn't there, in the railway at the moment? I think there's a massive skills gap. That's one of the things we need to touch on, isn't there? There's a huge skills gap. You don't have to look at the signalling really, and how long it takes to train those people up. So there will probably be programs and stuff that do come out to get people competent and stuff, because you know, people are going to start retiring. There is a gap there, and we need to make sure that people are, you know, filling those gaps. So you know, there's people are going to be needing to come in at some point, and like you said earlier, it doesn't have to be for trains, it doesn't have to be for tracks, it can be, you know, across any part of the business, whether it's for a big TOC or a Network Rail or, you know, one of the supply chain. It's good to get the talent in and regurgitate it around the industry. We don't want people leaving the industry, we want people to stay and get that experience and cross-pollinate, if you like, to make us all well-rounded. That's certainly how I see my career going, and it's partly why I work for a consultancy, is to get that exposure to other elements of the railway itself, whether, you know, in the future, if it's TfL or HS2 or something like that, that'd be fantastic, just to get other experience as well. So I've had TOC, I've got Network Rail, and in the future, hopefully I can expose myself to other areas and see how they operate, and what the challenges there are, or just throw my ideas at other things. Be good.
Most certainly. In terms of brands, probably this one's for yourself, Nina, because you must have seen thousands of CVs in your time of executive search. But in terms of some advice for people who are potentially looking to join the industry, you know, from completely fresh off the street, or people looking to make career moves, we probably get quite a bit of feedback, certainly within Network Rail, around a bit of a lack of clarity on, you know, how should I sell myself? What should I be putting on my CV? what makes me jump out on paper, you know, versus somebody else. How am I making the sift, essentially? So have you got any advice on how we should be looking to sell ourselves for that future, finding your North Star?
Do you know what, Laura? In terms of the CV, this is a really tricky question because increasingly organisations are using portals that you send your CV into. So there will be, I'm sure, at some point in the process, a real live person, but you have to make it through. If it's an online application process, it relies on AI, and the robot will have a look at your CV and it will say, right, are all the right words in here? Whereas the way that we do things at Intuitive is quite different because we all read the CV, and we read it in such a way that we are identifying not just job role titles and kind of, you know, how long you've been in the job for, and, you know, some kind of, all of that makes up the individual, but we are looking at the language that you've used. We're looking for evidence of achievement. So to give you quite a basic example of that, if we've got something in a CV which says I've improved something or I've reduced something, say in a cost context, or I've increased something, we'd like to know from what to what. Because you can say I've increased revenue, for example, and that could have gone from 10 quid to 15 quid. And it's like, well, happy days, but and well done, but it's not really going to, you know, rock my world. We need to know the size of the job that you've done. And when you say you've increased it from this to this, that's what we're interested in. When you're doing a job, a CV, we don't want a list of a job description in the CV. We know what one of those does. For example, you know, project manager, we know what a project manager is, and any decent recruiter should know what a project manager is. What we need to know is, what have you achieved for that employer? Why are they better off now having had you working for them than they were before? What value have you added? So when you're looking at the AI stuff, when you're looking at doing an online portal, you've got to be really aware from an AI perspective. Look at the job description and make sure that a good number of the words, the key words that are mentioned a few times in that job description, appear a few times in your CV, because that's what the robot is matching up to. So a bit of a kind of generic rant there, because I'm not terribly keen on online job portals, if I'm absolutely honest, but they're here, we've got to put up with them. For me, I think, and Lee is a brilliant example of this, visibility is key. So if you are already in the rail industry and you are looking for your next role, or at some point, you know, you want your career to progress, I cannot stress strongly enough how important LinkedIn is. So LinkedIn as a networking tool where you're doing one-to-many, because lots of people will see what you're doing, as long as, of course, you've got lots of connections. So you need to make sure that you're connecting with people, and they will then see the post. And I would say you need to be posting once or twice a week. You also need to be reacting and commenting on other people's posts in a way that you are really demonstrating your expertise and what you know, your knowledge, your experience. The other part, as Lee's already mentioned, is networking. So LinkedIn is networking on a larger scale, but getting yourself out and about to industry events. Again, we're talking about commitment. They're usually after work, putting the hours in, going to the networking events, meeting people, keeping in touch with them, connecting with, don't make any assumptions about who are the right people to connect to. Go and talk to people. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's interesting in some way, shape or form. I know we're kind of tight for time, so I'm feeling like those are probably the headlines, Laura, in terms of CV, LinkedIn and networking. Those would be my kind of, get your personal brand out there. Let's see who you are, be visible. Let us understand something about your personality.
No, I think that's fabulous, Nina, and certainly you are one of the great LinkedIn advocates, since I see you posting regularly, and you always keep me interested in where you've been out and about and having fun. Even in a work context, you can still make it look fun and interesting. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's something we all do need to get a bit better at and celebrating success, because I think there's probably been a bit of, you know, mixed messaging around using LinkedIn and making sure it's the right forum. But I think we do lots of good stuff, but we're quite subtle as an industry. We're almost a bit too polite, and we just see it as, oh, I've just done my job, so I'm not going to talk about it. But it's been a bit of a hard one for me, but the last few months, certainly personally, I've tried to get better at using it a bit more and sharing some success, especially where we've collaborated with supply chain or talking FOC colleagues, just to get something over the line that, you know, otherwise we would have really struggled to deliver. So I think it's a really great forum when it's used in the right way. And it also opens up our eyes to opportunities and events that are happening, you know, in your area, and go and chip in and get involved. Fabulous. Lee, is there anything else from your point of view, just as we come to our sort of close of the session? Any other final comments or contributions?
I think Nina touched on the LinkedIn bit. It's not willy-nilly adding everyone on LinkedIn. It's been what value can I add to that person, and how do they add value to me? Because it's when you've got loads and loads and loads of followers, it then becomes difficult to maintain a relationship with too many of them. So you'll find people do come and go, and some people just come on your journey. So I'd say create a story that people want to follow on your LinkedIn journey. You know, if you are trying to get into the industry or transport industry, think like, right, who do I want to aspire to be? Like, what type of job roles are they? Type in the job role, look at the industry, look at the people, add those people, quiz them, say, look, what have you got? How's your career been to date? How did you get to that point? Then look beyond that job role as well, people that are more senior. And that's basically what I did, if I'm honest. I did exactly that. I was adding people, rolling stock maintenance engineers, and then I was to MDs, and I was, you know, people message back, great. If they didn't, is what it is. And there was a lot of people that did message back, and they appreciated it. And I've come across them years later, and they remembered me and said, oh yeah, I remember following your LinkedIn journey, and yeah, well done, quite inspiring. And I guess it's also, once you get to that point and you've got to where you want to be, give back as well, you know, support people on their journeys. And I think one of the biggest ones for me was my best mate from the army was Lewis. As Nina knows Lewis, so he's quite an enthusiastic character. But he tried coming in as a project manager or assistant PM, and he was definitely, you know, as an individual, he was operating far above that, and he's still above, you know, he's a top operator. And he ended up going into health and safety because someone saw him in an interview for an APM role, and they were like, "No, you need to be going for something else." Like, and then he got a health and safety role, and now he's at Amaro, and he's done, you know, really, really well. And he's constantly on LinkedIn, and he's absolutely surpassed kind of where I was with LinkedIn. But it was just some guidance, you know. It was literally that guidance I've just said then, was follow the right people, do some enthusiastic posts, promote the industry, give back. And, you know, he's done it to an absolute T. And he's having a great career. So, you know, there is a bit of a formula to this. So it's just keep the attitude. You know, when the chips are down and it doesn't go your way, it didn't go the right way for me the first time. When I went to Siemens, they offered me an apprenticeship, and financially, leaving the army, I just couldn't make that work with 2 kids at the time. Otherwise, I'd have snapped their arm off. So I had to say no, and then I went to the GTR interview, and, you know, I got the job, and I haven't looked back really. I've been very fortunate, and I've always tried to give back where possible. So that's kind of what I would say. And I'd say I was very low on confidence as well when I was trying to get in, because I had 0 qualifications when I signed off from the army, and I saw a saying from Einstein a few years back, and it's always stuck with me. It's like, if you live your life, sorry, if a fish judges its ability to climb a tree, it lives its life thinking it's stupid. And that resonated with me, because I thought I was stupid. I thought, you know, how am I going to get an engineering job with no engineering qualifications? And then I went to a networking event. You know, 5 out of 5 people out of 150, I was one selected to do this rolling stock maintenance level 3 enter. And then, yeah, it was incredible, wasn't it? I mean, Nina followed the journey basically after that event, and you know, I had my real highs and lows for it. And for me to get in the industry, I had to travel 2.5 hours one way. So there is that you might have to commit to start, but you will reap the rewards later on. And I think the transferable skills at this industry, since I've been in for 5 years, I've learned so much. I could probably take that to any other industry, because the standards are high when you're doing work package plans or construction phase plans, and really got to be on the ball, especially from a safety perspective. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant industry. It's a lot of enthusiasm within it. There's a lot of support within it. You just got to reach out and find it. And there's so many good people out there to support those journeys, like Nina and yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you're probably both, just speaking from the limited time relatively that I've known you both, two of the most enthusiastic, passionate people. And I think when we've probably just touched on it for the whole of our time on this webinar, in terms of reaching out, making yourself known, and the amount of people that have got experience, knowledge, and a genuine desire to want to help you. I don't think I've met anybody yet who's, in the way and trying to put a blocker up to your journey and your success. And I think having that really strong network, it really does emphasise that the railway is one big family, and we are a very welcoming bunch. So yeah, personal thanks probably to you both for being present in the last few months and helping me feel inspired in some of the times where it can be blooming tricky. But I think keeping our collective warmth and energy, it's the thing that reminds you constantly. That's why we keep coming to work and doing what we do. So yeah, really big personal thanks for both making today happen, and also for all your personal contributions that you're adding and inspiring lots of like-minded people to get on board and join us on our journey. So yes, a genuine thank you. It's been a really great session and lovely to catch up with you both. So I shall stop recording.